You may have seen images of their weathered, collapsing pyramids tucked into the background of a globe-trotting friend's vacation photos. But chances are, you don't really know what daily life was like for the ancient Maya. From ritual ball games, to body modification, to getting energized on chocolate, Mayan culture shared far more similarities with the modern world than most people realize. To understand it better, it helps to look at how these people lived, celebrated, and survived in their everyday routines. The ancient Maya civilization covered an enormous territory, stretching across much of Central America, including parts of what are now southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. They formed a highly advanced society with impressive knowledge of astronomy, architecture, and agriculture. If you managed to avoid being offered up to one of their many gods, daily life involved working, eating, socializing, and decorating the body in creative ways. Despite their devotion to religion, the Maya didn't worship soba. They brewed ceremonial drinks, including one made from fermented tree bark, sweetened with honey, which they believed was a divine gift. Alcoholic cacao-based beverages were also common, sometimes mixed with hallucinogenic ingredients. Drinking was taken so seriously that some even used unconventional methods to intensify intoxication, a practice that is surprisingly well documented in surviving artwork and texts. Long before gold grills and flashy dental trends became symbols of style, the Maya were already modifying their teeth for aesthetic reasons. Their approach to dentistry was remarkably sophisticated for its time, especially when it came to appearance. Decorative stones were carefully embedded into drilled holes in the teeth, often without damaging nerves. While the procedure was undoubtedly painful, the result was a striking display of wealth and status. They lacked modern anesthetics, but walking away with a mouth full of polished gems was considered well worth the suffering, especially in a society where life could be abruptly cut short. One of the most infamous aspects of Mayan religion was the practice of human sacrifice. Offerings were made to appease the gods, with children often viewed as especially pure and desirable victims, though adults, prisoners, and enslaved people were also sacrificed. These rituals were dramatic and brutal, typically involving the removal of the heart atop a towering pyramid, after which the body was cast down the steps below. The ceremonies were meant to sustain cosmic balance, even if the process was terrifying for those involved. Food, however, was a bright spot in Mayan life. Their diet revolved around maize, beans, and squash, a trio known as the Three Sisters, that formed the nutritional foundation of their meals. They also enjoyed chili peppers, sweet potatoes, avocados, tomatoes, papayas, onions, and garlic. Meat came from sources like turkey, deer, fish, wild pigs, iguanas, and even dogs. The Maya pioneered corn tortillas, tamales, and the roasting of cacao beans to create chocolate, culinary innovations that continue to shape diets around the world today. Body modification went far beyond dentistry. Tattoos were earned through a grueling process that involved painting the skin, cutting into it, and then applying pigment directly into the wounds. Enduring this ordeal was seen as a mark of courage, and those who bore tattoos were respected for their toughness. Men typically waited until marriage before getting tattooed, while women also participated, though certain areas were avoided. Piercings were equally significant, serving both decorative and ritual purposes. Bloodletting was considered sacred, and people pierced ears, tongues, and other body parts using thorns or stingray spines. Skilled craftsmanship in jewelry made these modifications even more elaborate, though some forms of adornment were reserved strictly for men. Altogether, these practices made physical appearance a powerful expression of belief, bravery, and identity in the ancient Mayan world. If you were an ancient Mayan looking to let off some steam on the court, you might turn to a game known as Pocketok, considered the oldest team sport ever played. Unlike a casual pickup game today, this was not an activity for the weak or unprepared. Controlling a heavy rubber ball that could weigh around 10 pounds using only the hips and torso demanded extreme strength and precision. The sport was infamous for its violence, and players could suffer fatal internal injuries simply from the force of impact. In many cases, captives were forced to compete against one another, with the outcome determining who would be offered up in a ritual sacrifice. It was the ultimate sudden death match, where losing meant far more than just defeat. If you ever feel pressured by modern beauty standards, it helps to remember how extreme ideals were in ancient Mayan society. At the height of fashion, Crossed eyes and elongated skulls shaped like ears of corn were considered attractive. In pursuit of this look, infant soft skulls were bound between wooden boards for long periods, so their heads would grow into the desired form. The obsession with appearance extended even further. A pronounced receding hairline was fashionable, leading men to shave or even burn their hairlines to exaggerate the effect. Members of the elite elevated their appearance with elaborate headdresses crafted from animal skins, jade, and other valuable materials, proving that displays of status through fashion are hardly a modern invention. Maya medicine, however, was a mix of insight and error. Asthma was sometimes treated with tobacco, a remedy that created more problems than it solved. Digestive issues were believed to be cured by heavy drinking or even induced vomiting, an idea that likely came from questionable judgment. Despite these missteps, the Maya were remarkably clean by ancient standards. Regular bathing was common, and people routinely washed their hands and mouths after meals. Cold water baths and steam baths were often taken before religious rituals, setting them apart from many other civilizations of the same era. With all the piercings, tattoos, jeweled teeth, and dramatic hairstyles, clothing itself was generally kept simple. Men usually wore basic loincloths, sometimes adding ponchos when the weather turned cold. Women typically dressed in blouses paired with long skirts. That said, wealth changed everything. Among the upper classes, clothing became far more elaborate, decorated with shells, jade, and intricate designs that clearly distinguished elites from commoners. Daily work was divided along traditional lines. Most women handled domestic responsibilities, such as raising children, gathering honey, sewing, and producing pottery. Men, meanwhile, worked the agricultural fields known as milpas. Farming was physically demanding, made even harder by the fact that the Maya did not rely on draft animals. Every task, from clearing land to harvesting crops, was done by human strength alone. It was a true test of endurance and self-reliance. Regardless of social rank, most people lived in residential compounds shared with extended family members. Even wealth offered no escape from crowded living arrangements. Homes were made up of several structures arranged around patios and terraces, typically built from limestone with packed earth floors and walls coated in adobe. While the Maya are celebrated for their intellectual and architectural achievements, the simplicity of dirt floors had its own advantage, requiring little maintenance. Travel was another challenge of everyday life. Cities were linked by raised stone roads, some towering several feet above the ground. Without animals to transport goods, enslaved laborers carried supplies on foot, often in long chains. For reaching distant regions, large canoes were used, some stretching up to 50 feet in length. Even so, long-distance travel was exhausting, making staying close to home the easier option. Life in the ancient Mayan world was intense and demanding. Surviving its rituals, physical hardships, and daily struggles required resilience, and it leaves open the question of how many people today would truly be willing to trade modern comforts for such a life.